This is video number 2 for week 3 of Theater 191, Theater in Context, Theater Spaces. As we've already discussed in class, theater can happen in a lot of different places. And in your reading, it quotes Peter Brook's The Empty Space, that I can take an empty room and have a person walk across the stage, and that is now a theater. And I'm paraphrasing there, but you can go back and check that in chapter 1. However, there are about 4 main types of theater spaces, and it's important to have an idea of what types of things happen in which types of spaces. And these are proscenium theaters, thrust stages, theater in the round or arena stages, and black box theaters. Proscenium stages are what we traditionally think of as the theater. They are the big spaces with the ornate, beautiful frames, like you can see in this picture here. You can see the frame right there all the way around it. That is what we would call the proscenium arch, which is where the theater gets its name. It's a very large stage generally. It also has a lot of space for backstage scene devices and many more seats than most of the other traditional theater spaces. This type of theater only begins in the 17th century. Prior to that, theater spaces would basically happen in courts and, as we'll see, in specific sort of thrust stages, which we'll get to in the next slide. So what can happen on stage in the proscenium? You get detailed scenic design. Many proscenium theaters have fly spaces so that you can fly in and out, which is up and down, basically. Large, beautiful flats and painted scenery so that you can quickly change the space. Many different locations can be realized quickly in mostly realistic ways. Additionally, in the 17th century, when this type of theater was being created, perspective scenery and perspective drawing was a very big part of the art world, and so perspective scenery on an angle became the important thing to think about. Underneath this video, you can see another YouTube video about the Drottningham Court Opera Theater, which is a 17th century stage in action, and you can see all of the machinations and machinery really that helped create this kind of quick change in the 17th century. The thrust stage. A thrust stage is surrounded by audience on 3 sides, which is why it's also often called a 3/4 thrust, because the audience will be on 1, 2, 3 sides of the 4-sided stage, giving the actor space behind to enter and exit. This also means that when the actor comes on stage, when they're all the way out here, unlike in the proscenium where things look very 2D, so you can see only the front or the back side of the actor, in the thrust stage, the actor is very much a 3D visual. So depending on where you are, you can see all different kinds of angles on stage. This puts the action right out into the audience and doesn't remove the action like on the proscenium stage. The picture that we're looking at right here is of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, which was a thrust stage. And the picture is not the original Globe, which burned down, but a reimagined, remade version of it that exists in London today. Our next version of a theater space is what we'd call in the round or an arena stage. And that what this means is that the audience is on all sides of the performance. So actors enter through walkways that are called vaumes, and you can see those right here and here and here and here. So in this particular setup, there are 4. Obviously, there is not as much possible for large scenic elements like there would be on the proscenium stage or in the thrust, because they would block the audience's line of sight, or what we would call a sight line. For example, if a audience member is sitting here and you had a giant scenic element that was taking up most of the stage there, if an actor walked behind it, people on this side of the stage would not be able to see it anymore. So it would be a blocked sight line. And this type of theater can be a square or a circle, but the most important thing that makes it arena is that the audience is on all sides. And this particular visual in this slide comes from the Arena Stage, which is well named, in Washington, D.C. Finally, of the 4 types that I told you we would be discussing in this video, we have the black box theater. And that is exactly what it says it is. Our Studio 88 at Miami University of Ohio is what we would call a black box theater. It's generally a smaller theater space that is all painted black, and it has flexible seating. So the seating can move into all of the different seating arrangements. So proscenium style, where everyone is on one side, or 3/4 thrust, where the audience is on 3 sides, or arena, any of those things, or something else entirely. Whatever the theater artists want to do, the seating is flexible, so it can become any of the other types or something else entirely. Finally, some other types of theater spaces, or types of theater generally that utilize different spaces. You could have a processional form of theater, and this means that the audience moves through the theater pieces. So instead of being a seated audience who watches a performance on a stage, the audience walks through the performance, or they process, which is a word to mean to walk, and that's called processional theater. Additionally, you could be in a found space or site-specific type of theater, which means that the site itself becomes the stage. An example of this might be something like there is a company out in California, in San Francisco, that did a production of Hamlet on Alcatraz. So they were thinking about how that space becomes the set itself. That production was not only site-specific, but also processional. So they didn't just sit in Alcatraz and watch Hamlet. They walked through Alcatraz and Hamlet happened around them. Next, we have street theater, and this is a performance where the performer creates theater in the street without any particular concern for where they are. And that's what makes it different from site-specific or found space, is that the space itself is not the set. The set is not important. They're just creating theater wherever they are. A lot of improv troupes might do something like this. And finally, we have immersive theater, which is like processional, but the audience can go wherever they want. And this is what Sleep No More was. Because in a processional theater, you need to go in a very specific order. In immersive theater, you are immersed into the story, and it can happen in any place, and there's not necessarily a right way to go through it.